Gordon Sondland served as Donald Trump's ambassador to the EU and was also a key witness against him during his first impeachment trial.
Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes.
Then after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Sondland said he could no longer support Trump. But now, after 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, he says he's changed his mind. Earlier, I spoke to Sondland about why he thinks Donald Trump is the best choice for America. Ambassador Sondland, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Rosemary.
So you have an interesting story that I'm hoping we can talk about and explain a little bit. You said that you wouldn't support Donald Trump after January 6th, and now you are back to a place where you do plan to support him and vote for him. Tell me what led to this this bit of a flip-flop, as it were.
Well, January 6th was a very dark day in the United States. There's no doubt about it. Sadly, Donald Trump did lose the election. Was there fraud? Was there miscounting of votes? Of course there was. But did it amount to enough to change the outcome? It did not. And Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States currently. Yeah. So let's put that aside. But after 4 years under the Biden-Harris laws, rules, regulations, foreign policy, all of a sudden I had to put January 6th into perspective. And what has been going on in our country on a lurch towards socialism, makes January 6th pale in comparison.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the issues that you think are problematic or have been problematic under Biden and that Donald Trump could correct. Foreign policy, obviously a big concern for you. Tell me how you think Donald Trump would have handled the war in Ukraine differently, or how he would handle it better.
I actually agree with him. I don't always agree with him on everything, but I agree with him when he says that the war in Ukraine likely would not have happened under his watch. He had a very interesting, and does have a very interesting, relationship with Vladimir Putin. He compliments him in public, which is sort of a counterintuitive move. Every other president sort of decries Putin, and Putin just sits back in the Kremlin and laughs. Donald Trump, on the other hand, compliments him in public, which sort of puts him on his heel, and then in private basically threatens him and says, look at Vladimir, if you go into Ukraine, I'm going to have to bomb Moscow. So don't test me.
So when he says that he is prepared to abandon NATO and wants to cut off billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine, don't you see that as a problem for Ukraine if they're fighting against Russia?
He's not abandoning NATO, and he's never said he would abandon NATO. What he said was he wants the Europeans to do their part in terms of their defense spending as a percentage of GDP. The Europeans have been riding on the United States' back for decades, and it's time to even up the numbers. And that's what he's asked for. He has never said he's walking away from NATO.
Let's talk a little bit about the tariffs. He has said that he would impose a 60% tariffs on all goods for China and a 20% or 10% on all other imports into the United States. I know you're a businessman. There are people that believe that tariffs of that magnitude could be very damaging to the economy compared to what Kamala Harris has put on the table. What is your view on the tariffs?
Well, Rosemary, he doesn't use the tariffs, or he didn't during his first term structurally. He uses them to correct behavior. So he'll approach the European Union, he'll approach China, and he'll say, I want this adjustment to our trade relationship. And the usual response is, thank you, Mr. President, we'll take that under advisement and we'll get back to you in 20 years. And his response is, great. While you're thinking about it, here are some tariffs to keep it front of mind. Okay. And those tariffs have the propensity to correct behavior very quickly and bring people to the table that ordinarily would just blow off a request by the United States to readjust the relationship.
It does sound as though some of the things you're saying is take Donald Trump's words with a grain of salt. Is that sort of what you're saying?
With a shaker of salt,
shaker.
not a grain, the
Right.
whole shaker.
Yeah, that is might be hard for some people who hear some of his rhetoric, perhaps potentially also in these last couple of weeks where it's been very aggressive, heated, sometimes dehumanizing, and think of, we should believe who he's putting in front of us, and we should take him at his word. Why do you think that's not the case as someone that worked with him and knows him?
Well, something, that would be a fair assessment to make if Donald Trump had not been president. In other words, if Donald Trump were up to bat for a first term, given the rhetoric, one would have potential reason to worry given some of the things that he said. But having served with him for 4 years and heard the rhetoric, and then in private heard the reality of how he governed, watched the economy, watched our adversaries and our allies, watched how Black unemployment went to the lowest level in the history of our country, how interest rates were at the lowest level in the history of our country. When I looked at the reality rather than the dialogue, things were pretty calm for 4 years until COVID hit.
What would be concerns, do you think? Obviously, Canada very much invested in trade with the United States, and that is sort of top of mind for us in that relationship, and obviously challenges for both candidates. What do you think Donald Trump would do in terms of his approach to trade and tariffs with Canada?
Well, one thing Donald Trump has been very clear about is he wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States.
Right.
There are manufacturers producing products for the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, and he wants to reduce that. He wants us to have indigenous manufacturing capability so that when the world blows up, and I say that figuratively, not literally, we can produce whatever it is we need here and not have to rely on others. And that is a reasonable approach to take. If I were in his shoes, I would do the same thing.
I'm sure you've seen over the past week or so the comments that former Chief of Staff John Kelly has made about Donald Trump, Kamala Harris agreeing with the characterization that Donald Trump is a fascist. There are people who are really concerned about democracy in your country. Obviously, you had those concerns too around January 6th and the peaceful transition of power. Why do you feel like that is not a concern going forward? Because obviously you've now been able to sort of reflect on that. And if you're comfortable voting for Mr. Trump, you're comfortable with that. So why are you confident democracy is not at risk and there will be a peaceful transition of power regardless of who wins?
Well, let's take these in pieces. First of all, I have nothing but the utmost respect for John Kelly's service to the United States. He's a distinguished officer, and I have no criticism of John Kelly and his service to our country. That having been said, there's clearly an axe to grind between John Kelly and Donald Trump. And I think a lot of what John Kelly is saying is a little bit of sour grapes.
What about the issue of protecting democracy and transition of power, though, Ambassador, given that is the issue that sort of tipped the balance for you before? How comfortable are you with the idea that Donald Trump will accept the results and allow the democracy to continue if he is president, or allow a vice president to become president?
Well, I think he will accept the results, but I don't think the results are going to be quick in coming.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we have so many different voting systems, and Republicans have always been for a straightforward, simple voting system that requires voter identification. It requires proof that you're a citizen. And unfortunately, for some reason, the Democrats like to continue to fight against that. They call it disenfranchisement, but it's not disenfranchisement. You need ID to do everything from, drive a car to walk into a Costco. And why it's so difficult to make sure that a person is a citizen and votes once only in a federal election, I'll never understand. And that's what's bringing a lot of these election day skirmishes to the fore.
Ambassador Sondland, thank you for making the time for us, sir. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.